The impact hit like a thunderclap. No warning, no signal, just fire and death. The UES Wardruna shook violently as the first blast tore through its forward stabilizers. Sparks erupted from the ceiling. Red light strobed across the bridge, drowning everything in urgent mechanical screaming. "Impact on decks 4 through 6! Hull breach!" Lieutenant Eames shouted, gripping the edge of his station. Captain Tobias Jurgensen didn't flinch. He was already moving, pushing off the command rail. "Seal the compartments. Activate emergency bulkheads. Now." 7 years out in the outer fringe had honed every reflex. They weren't explorers anymore. They were survivors wrapped in armor, barely holding. "Where the hell did that come from?" asked Jen, the navigator, wiping blood from her cheek. The screen in front of her was nothing but static. Jurgensen's eyes narrowed. "Bring the passive scanners online. No emissions. I want to see who just shot us." But there was no time. Another blast slammed the Wardruna, slicing through the aft cargo bays like a blade through paper. On-screen, fire erupted in slow, beautiful arcs, atmospheric gas combusting as the integrity failed. Deck 8 was gone. So were Santos and Major O'Reilly. "Engine matrix destabilizing," muttered Specialist Kwan, voice thin through his helmet mic. "They're targeting us with precision. No warnings, no challenge. They're not guessing. Because they think we're something else," Jurgensen said, almost to himself. The Wardruna had crossed into Sector Hektal just 3 hours ago. A quiet passage through a supposedly neutral zone, recently annexed by some upstart empire the diplomatic corps hadn't updated into the patrol charts. Nobody thought twice. Now the ship was dying. "Protocol beacons active," Eames called out. "Broadcasting mission identifier. Treaty markers attached." "Too late for that," Jurgensen muttered. He felt the deck under his feet buckle slightly. Then came the third hit. Not a slice this time, but a punch. Hull Section C shattered. Pressure alarms screamed. Somewhere down the corridor, someone was shouting for help. Then nothing but vacuum. "Emergency pod, Section Bravo 9, he ordered. "Get who's left. Go." Kwan looked back at him. "You're not coming? I'll be right behind." It was a lie. He sprinted down the corridor as another internal detonation blew open the infirmary doors. The hallway was a mess of smoke, flickering lights and bodies. Jurgensen dropped to one knee beside a downed technician. Bryn, maybe 19, barely trained. Her arm was gone, torn off in the blast. "Captain," she whispered. He didn't answer. He lifted her, moved, fast. The emergency pod's outer seals were already cycling open when he shoved inside. 4 of them made it. Kwan, Jen, Eames, and himself. Bryn had gone still in his arms halfway there. He laid her gently against the side bulkhead as the pod's clamps released. "Jurgensen to command. Emergency evac complete. Wardruna is lost. Survivors en route. Initiating encrypted transmission. Codename Arcanis." The pod launched. From the viewport, they watched their home. 7 years of silent endurance, rupture and break apart in a slow ballet of fire and metal. Then it was gone. No tears, no words, just breath. Far behind them, the Wardruna's last signal pulsed into the dark. In orbit above Hektal's primary moon, the Kravthor war station shifted position. From its spire-like hull extended long, curved cannons that shimmered with residual plasma. Its command deck was dark and angular, lit only by projection glyphs, runes dancing in the air like coiled smoke. At its center stood Supreme Sentinel Garekra, a figure cloaked in black iridescent armor that twisted as he moved, like scales reflecting unseen stars. His 4 arms moved with elegant precision over the command altar, and from the segmented mask on his face, a low rasp filtered out. "Target neutralized, no countermeasures detected." The others around him, tall, demon-faced, with glistening tusks and radiant eye implants, watched in silence. They were Kravthor, the newest force to rise from the fire-broken edges of the Eastern Galactic Spiral. They looked like myths, avatars sculpted in the image of Ravana and Kali. their horns coiled back like ceremonial blades, armor fused with skin, every gesture ritualistic and deliberate. "Scanners confirm no military registry," one growled. "Signal flagged unknown. Designation not recognized," another intoned. They believed they had just crushed a pirate vessel, perhaps smugglers with stolen encryption. No threat, no consequence. "Purge all fragments from orbit," Garikra ordered. "Begin cycle scan. Prepare for civilian transit corridor activation." As the Kravthor vessels moved to sterilize the remains, they failed to notice the pulse echoing through the subspace layer, a whisper made of fire. On Earth, in the heart of the old North American continent, a silent station buried beneath the Colorado Shield flickered to life. No lights, no alarms, just motion. Long dead systems roared awake, satellites aligned, beacons locked. A signal was received, confirmed, and sent forward through the Veil relays. Within 6 seconds, deep under Altair, 3 underground installations received the pulse. 12 seconds later, Earth's Central Defense AI verified the transmission. Patrol vessel Wardruna destroyed. Protocol Arcanis. Authorized. Inside the cramped emergency pod, Jurgensen sat in the corner, hands clasped tight. Across from him, Eames stared at the floor, lips pressed in silence. Jen's eyes were wet, but she didn't blink. Quan was humming quietly, a song no one recognized, maybe something from his childhood. Jurgensen looked at the faces around him. "Bryn didn't make it," he said. They all nodded. They didn't need to ask why the pod launched with 5 souls, and now held 4. "Why would they attack a patrol ship?" Jen finally said. "They had to see the signal. They had to." "They didn't care," Quan murmured. "Or they didn't know." "They're new, the Kravthor," Eames added. "Just got admitted to the Galactic Council. Maybe they didn't study the treaties." "They will now," Jurgensen said quietly. "And so will everyone else." He looked out into the stars, not at the light, but at the dark between. Behind him, inside the pod's primary console, a hidden system blinked green. The signal had gone out. The galaxy had been warned. And humanity, forgotten, quiet, dismissed, was now listening. Beneath the oceans of Altair Far, a continent-wide grid blinked once, then roared to life. Buried 2 kilometers under the ash bed of the planet's southern hemisphere, Station R7 unlocked itself. Seals broke with pressurized hisses. Internal fusion cores awakened like sleeping beasts, flooding dormant corridors with heat and purpose. 3 identical installations followed suit, one beneath the ice crust of Altair 9, another sealed within the dead canyons of Altair 2. No personnel manned them. They didn't need to. The machines had their orders. They'd been waiting over 300 years. Arcanis had been authorized. In less than 60 seconds, encrypted pulses spread through Solnet's dormant shadow web, lighting up terminals only a few remembered existed. Ancient AI constructs, designed during the forgotten conflicts, emerged from centuries of stasis. And they did not hesitate. On Earth, in a chamber that hadn't hosted a war council in over a century, men in dark coats gathered in silence. General August Drake stood at the center, his voice cut through the room like a blade. Wardruna destroyed, confirmed hostile engagement. Mission protocol beacon was active at time of impact. The signal was ignored. Around him, holograms pulsed with real-time telemetry, ships, coordinates, names, and call signs. "We are no longer dealing with a diplomatic breach. This is an act of war against a treaty patrol." No one responded. No one needed to. Beside him, Commander Raphael Orlan watched the data cascade across the room. His jaw tightened. "Who are they?" he asked. Drake didn't look away from the projections. Kravthor Imperium, newly annexed sector. Aggressive expansionist state. They're young. Then they just made an old mistake, Orlan muttered. Deep in the Kuiper extension zones, a signal fragmented through the silence and reached the Ashura. The vessel stirred like something ancient, remembering how to breathe. Drifting far beyond the scanning perimeter of any current-era relay, Ashura was one of the few ships still in operation under the old flag. Built before sleek design overtook resilience, her form was angular, armored in layered tungsten-titanium alloy, and riddled with retrofitted kinetic barriers from long-dead programs. Inside, Captain Magnus Watson opened his eyes as the ship's AI whispered to life. Priority signal received. Protocol Arcanis. Extraction required. Target location marked. He didn't speak. He just reached for his old coat, still folded over the command seat, and slung it across his shoulders. "Prepare slip ignition," he ordered. "We're going to get them." Meanwhile, in orbit above Hektal, aboard the Kravthor warship Mahaldir, celebration echoed through the crystalline halls. "The vessel is confirmed destroyed. No residuals left. Victory is complete," said Admiral Korval, his voice curling with pride. Korval stood tall, adorned in segmented crimson armor with jagged plates and ceremonial bone crests etched into his helmet. A thick blue sash ran across his chest, marking him as a veteran of the burning reclamation. His eyes gleamed behind angular visors. Beside him, his second-in-command, Virok, less decorated but broader in stature, clanged his gauntlet against his chest. "No retaliation, no message. The prey bleeds, yet it does not howl." "Of course they don't," Korval growled. It was a pirate vessel, nothing more. Barely armed, they didn't even fire back. On the lower deck, scribes recorded the exchange. Kravthor tradition demanded ritual retellings for victorious engagements, even against minor prey. But then the doors slid open. An interruption. Unusual. A hunched figure draped in data shrouds and optical coils slithered through the archway. Dr. Rehlan, an information arcanist from the Ministry of Threat Analysis, bowed slightly. "My lords, the recovered signal fragment, decoded." Korval barely glanced at him. "Irrelevant. You delay the feast for telemetry." Raylan continued, voice thinner. "The vessel was not a rogue." Korval stopped. Raylan's fingers trembled as he displayed the symbol. Faded, singed, but unmistakable. A silver insignia, triangular, with a twin-ringed earth surrounding a single star. Humanity Verification Force. A cold hush fell across the war bridge. Virok stepped forward. "That can't be accurate. They were too slow. No countermeasures. That was no military craft." Raylan's breath quickened. It was a patrol ship under the Arcanis Treaty classification. They were surveying war zones. Old war zones. Korval stared at the emblem. Slowly he sat. "We attacked under full fire," Virok whispered. "No warning. We destroyed a treaty vessel." "Does the Council know?" Korval asked. "Not yet, but they will," Raylan said. Korval stood again, slower this time. "Send the report, quietly, to the Senate. Tell them, we may have made an error." On Earth's orbital belt, Relay Station Lambda 43 registered the incoming signal from the escape pod. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a whisper, tight beam, encrypted, directional. Only a specific node would catch it. It hit the one it needed. "Survivors confirmed," the relay AI announced. Names scrolled across the interface. Tobias Jurgensen, alive. In the lower strata of Earth Defense Command, alarms were unnecessary. Everyone was already moving. General Drake reviewed the message in silence. Then he turned to his aide. "Activate the Ashura. Dispatch immediately. They'll intercept within 70 minutes. Use the old gravity funnel routes. I want them off the edge before the Kravthor even realize we're watching." "Yes, sir." Drake exhaled. "One more thing. Make sure Jurgensen knows." He paused, fists tightening behind his back. He didn't survive for nothing. The Kravthor Senate chamber was a monolith of dark stone and organic steel, suspended over a glowing abyss of planetary magma. Delegates floated in thrones carved from meteorite shards, each framed by their faction's war banners. "Who authorized the attack?" shouted Senator Ishkar, a lean figure with 4 snake-like tendrils extending from his back, each adorned with ceremonial blades. "Do we know what we've done?" bellowed Speaker Dal Jun, his entire torso armored in live-scale plates that pulsed with bioluminescence. Korval's image flickered on the central spire. "The vessel's markings were not in our records. We fired preemptively, assuming pirate affiliation. The signal was misread." "You misread an Arcanis treaty signature," roared Ishkar. "Do you know what that means?" "They won't come," muttered Chancellor Veros, his voice hoarse. "The humans haven't moved in decades. They've withdrawn. This was a ghost." Tal Jun turned his gaze to him. "Then why did the stars blink last night?" Altair's eyes opened. No one answered. In the Ashura, Magnus Watson stood in the command center, watching the retrieval drones lock onto the pod's signal. "Prep medbay. 4 survivors," he ordered. "Should we hail Earth for confirmation?" asked Lieutenant Halley. "No," Watson said. "They'll know. The network's awake now." "And the Kravthor?" Halley asked. "They haven't moved." Watson looked out at the black stretch ahead. "They will," he said. "And when they do, they'll remember what happens when you poke something that only looks like it's sleeping." The hiss of the docking clamps releasing echoed through the narrow chamber like a breath held too long. The pod's hatch opened with a metallic groan, and Captain Tobias Jurgensen stepped out into the cold, humming corridor of the Ashura. He didn't stumble. He didn't pause. He carried the weight of 4 survivors and a dead ship on his shoulders, and moved like every second wasted was a life unpaid for. Behind him, Jen supported Quan, who was barely conscious, pale and shivering, blood crusting his side. Eames followed, his face rigid, cradling his own fractured arm like it was a minor inconvenience. They were met by a small team, no formal reception, no ceremony, just action. A medic named Daria braced Quan, guiding him toward the infirmary. Her expression said everything. She knew what kind of wreck came from the outer dark. She didn't ask. A man waited at the end of the corridor. Captain Magnus Watson, Ashura's commanding officer. Older, broader in the shoulders, eyes that hadn't rested in decades. He met Jurgensen with a slow nod, not of respect, but recognition. "You're home," Watson said. "I wish it were under better stars." Jurgensen looked past him, already walking. "I need a command room, and I need to know who lit the match." "You'll get both, but first medbay. That's not optional. I've got more important things than a broken rib." "It's not for you. Quan's bleeding out." Jurgensen stopped, just for a second. Then he turned. "Lead the way." The infirmary was dim, quiet. Jen sat beside Quan's bed, whispering something in Mandarin he didn't understand. Eames had passed out from the painkillers. Machines beeped steadily. No chaos, no wailing. Just a room holding people who refused to fall apart. Jurgensen stood off to the side while the medics worked. A nurse passed him a stim pack. He didn't thank her. He just took it and kept standing. Watson stepped beside him. "You've got every right to fall over right now. No one would judge." Jurgensen shook his head. 4 of us made it. That's all." "And how many didn't?" He didn't answer. "I know what you're feeling," Watson said after a moment. "And I know what's coming next. You don't get time to mourn. Not yet. That's not the part that hurts. What is?" "I didn't hear their voices. When the hull cracked, I didn't hear anyone scream. They just vanished, like they were never there." Watson didn't offer comfort, only silence. Then he turned. "Come on. Command wants to talk to you, face to face." The Ashura's command deck wasn't vast. It didn't need to be. It was dense, compact, covered in outdated but brutally efficient systems that had outlived half the modern fleet. Jurgensen stepped inside, boots echoing on the reinforced flooring. A dozen officers glanced up. Some recognized him. Most simply stepped back, giving him space. A projection rose in the center of the room. Earth's Defense Command. General August Drake appeared, arms behind his back, jaw locked. Captain Jurgensen, you are officially under active duty status as of this moment. Understood. You're aware of the Protocol Arcanis. I triggered it. You did more than that, Drake said, and a new projection bloomed around them, systems lighting up, markers flaring across half a dozen sectors. Red bands traced through Altair, Trappist, and the old core routes. Vessel groups activated, stations lit, ground batteries armed. Symbols from the past, units that hadn't seen light in decades, moved like ghosts rising. This is what you brought back with you, Drake said, and I don't say that as a condemnation. Jurgensen stepped forward, staring at the web of motion. These are response fleets, he said. No, Watson corrected from behind him. These are reminders. Jurgensen watched the old formation patterns realign, warships named after battles long forgotten, spinning into route trajectories. None of it felt reactionary. None of it was fear. They're not retaliating, he said aloud. They're teaching. Drake's face didn't move. We warned the galaxy once, through treaties, through silence. That silence was mistaken for weakness. That ends now. Far across the stars, on the Council moon orbiting Balkar Prime, the Grand Assembly was in session. The room was a dome of transparent alloy, hanging above the moon's silver lakes. Representatives floated in anti-grav thrones, or stood in coiled stasis pods. The oldest species occupied the highest perches, the Sireldar, the Mahari, the Tanreth. Below them, the younger powers, new to the stage, the Kravthor. Ambassador Drej of the Kravthor stood at the speaking platform, forearms spread, head lowered, horns glinting in the ambient light. His voice echoed with urgency. The attack was a misclassification. Our orbital systems mistook the vessel for a raider. There was no intent to violate the treaty. The Tanreth Elder, a skeletal being woven of glassy filaments and encased in an exosuit of humming circuits, replied with a voice that sounded like breaking ice. You fired without verification, Drej pressed on. We request immediate intervention, a call for diplomatic pause. The humans are mobilizing, if not stopped. You broke a sacred boundary, said Councillor Vuren of the Sireldar, a tall, luminous entity with ink-like skin and glimmering internal veins. A patrol vessel under the Human Verification Force. That is not a line one crosses. They've been silent for generations, Drej exclaimed. You all said they'd withdrawn, that they had no interest in further entanglements. They withdraw, because they know what happens when they don't. One of the younger delegates, a Haraxi named Tolran, wrapped in metallic feathers and cybernetic veins, leaned forward. They don't respond with words. They respond with verdicts. You didn't provoke a nation. You provoked a consequence. Drej staggered slightly, his claws trembling. So, none of you will intervene? No one answered. Back aboard the Ashura, Jurgensen stood alone on the forward deck, surrounded by curved glass and silent stars. The projection still shimmered beside him. Fleets moving, stations activating, fallback lines shrinking. He heard the door open behind him. Lieutenant Halley stepped in. She didn't salute, just stood beside him quietly. You okay, sir? No. She nodded. We got your people stabilized. Quan's sleeping. Jen refused the medbay, but she'll rest eventually. He didn't respond. She waited a beat. You didn't come back empty-handed. I came back with ghosts. Sometimes that's all we need to remember who we are. He turned to her finally. How long until we hit forward command? 18 minutes. We'll link up with the First Response Corps and receive primary assignments. He nodded. They didn't know who we were. Halley's voice was soft. They do now. He faced the stars again, jaw tight. The deck was quiet. No music. No noise. Just breathing. You didn't just return, Captain. You reactivated the definitive response. The sky above Ganshar City darkened not from clouds, but from the emergency defense grid going live. In the Senate Tower of Barihman, capital of the Kravthor Imperium, voices clashed with the raw heat of panic. Red glow emergency banners pulsed across the marble walls. Tactical projections swirled mid-air, flickering with enemy fleet markers, each one bearing the unmistakable signature, Earth Origin. They're coming. No diplomatic route, no ultimatum, just movement. Minister of Defense Kolrath's voice rumbled through his breathing mask, each word wrapped in metallic echo. His thick, jagged armor plates bristled with embedded neural spines. We need to mobilize planetary reserves, move orbital weaponry to standby, and shift our industrial arcs off-world. A dozen other senators shouted back across the chamber, each framed by ceremonial flame crests glowing faintly in protest. Most wore traditional command robes, dyed with the dark purples of high caste. The chamber, once built for majestic deliberation, now crackled with open fracture. We don't have confirmation they intend to attack, barked Senator Jarun, scales twitching down his throat as his voice strained. We cannot assume the worst of a species that just deployed 3 assault fleets from Trappist and 2 from Luthien, Kolrath cut in, and brought dreadnoughts out of mothball orbit. You want to call that a patrol mission? They haven't crossed the border. They don't have to. Kolrath slammed his clawed fist onto the command rail. The humans don't knock. They remember. And now we're what they're remembering. At the lower tier, half forgotten among the shouts, a thin figure raised a hand. Ambassador Ralik Ven, the senior diplomat from the path of soft ascension. Clad in silk-veined layers rather than armor, he stood with visible restraint. If we submit an immediate apology, offer reparations, surrender orbital command codes. No, Kolrath snapped. We don't beg predators. They're not predators, Ven replied. They're executioners. A silence spread across the chamber like a shroud. No vote was held, no declaration passed. Because beneath the anger, beneath the pride and fury, the truth clung to the air like ash. The humans had not sent a warning. They had begun to move. Far from Barihman, in the orbit of Trappist 7C, the old warp gate groaned awake. Twin vertical pylons hummed, their dormant circuits flaring white-blue as the surrounding void twisted with gravitational bloom. A ship passed through, then another, then 17 more. They were not sleek, not beautiful. The vessels were heavy-bodied, gunmetal beasts, each scarred by age and designed before aesthetics mattered. A recommissioned dreadnought, Soul's Burden, took point, its hull etched with the names of cities no longer standing. Following close, 4 command ships, dozens of long-range warships, and the unmistakable triangular silhouettes of human assault vessels known only by classification codes. They traveled in perfect formation, no scatter, no deviation. They didn't cloak, they didn't hide, because they wanted to be seen. The Galactic Council convened for an emergency session above Nabari Delta. The chamber, shaped like a spiraling galaxy, glowed faintly under rotating banners of every major civilization. Holograms danced through the air, fleet movements, intercepted transmissions, updated treaty statuses. A Kravthor envoy materialized in the center ring, eyes flickering with desperation. "We request intervention," Chancellor Borzan said. His thick hide glistened with stress, 4 tusks curling down like daggers. "Immediate mediation, immediate de-escalation. Humanity has broken every diplomatic channel." Councillor Vurain of the Cyrildar, framed by streams of quantum mist and adorned in a bio-gown that shifted with its mood, offered no reaction. "No," he said simply. "Then you condemn us," Borzan growled. "You condemned yourselves," Vurain said. "The moment you opened fire on a treaty vessel, they can't punish an entire empire without trial. They already are." Councillor Rahdan of the Mahari, his crystalline body refracting every light in the chamber, leaned forward. "The humans don't broadcast intent, they act. That is their warning." From the rear gallery, a voice rang out, a human ally. It was Salukar Gun, representative of the neutral Marin Confederacy. He hovered, his insectoid wings held tight against a carapace robe of woven synth silk. "They don't march for glory," he said. "They march to remind you who they are." In orbit around Earth's second moon facility, the Central Command Array issued a priority burst. Across dozens of fringe systems, human listening posts reactivated. Earth-origin AI constructs recompiled forgotten fleet patterns. Outer station fuel depots once thought abandoned reported full resupply status. On Jupiter's artificial ring, a warehouse opened for the first time in 147 years. Inside, stacked like dormant titans, were payloads marked Vindicator Class, authorized under Arcanis only. On Mercury's shadow side, the planetary skin cracked open, revealing a cannon that hadn't been touched since the Nightfall Rebellion. And above Luthien, in geosync orbit, a relic fleet stirred under black banners once considered ceremonial. Their hulls bore no paint, no vanity. Only names: Resolution, Hell's Reach, Ashmaker. The first containment fleet had returned. Back in Bari Haman, chaos brewed. Every corridor of the Kravthor High Command pulsed with overlapping orders. Stratcom units barked impossible deployments. Civil leaders were evacuated to moonside bunkers. The Military Council, desperate to control the spiral, attempted to coordinate planetary shields and recall orbital patrols. But every step clashed with internal sabotage. Ministers no longer agreed. Some refused to follow Kolrath's war orders. Others sought back-channel diplomacy. One governor collapsed during a speech. Another broadcast a call for secession. At the heart of it, Kolrath stood unmoved. He stared at the static feed of the approaching human fleets, eyes locked not on their weapons, but their silence. "They're not broadcasting demands," he said to no one in particular. "Not even a list of terms. Not even a warning shot." His adjutant, Commander Varjul, leaned closer. "Then what are they waiting for?" Kolrath's voice was a growl. "They're not waiting. They're watching who flinches." Aboard the Ashura, now in forward staging orbit near Crescent Verge, Captain Magnus Watson and Tobias Jurgensen stood side by side at the primary table. Projected above them was a new map. It didn't show battlefields. It showed memory. Each system marked had been part of an old war. Not declared, not won, survived. "This isn't about territory," Jurgensen said, arms crossed. "Not about conquest. We could have sent envoys. We didn't, because this was never about their future." Watson nodded. "It's about ours." "Command's clear," Jurgensen continued. "No occupation, no flag planting. We hit hard, fast, then we leave. They get the message, or they don't." "And if they don't?" Watson asked. "They'll never forget what they didn't understand." In the council chamber, the Kravthor once again requested discussion. This time, fewer species showed up. Some seats were dark. Others appeared as empty holograms, with pre-recorded statements filed hours before. No species stood to defend the Kravthor, not because they agreed with the humans, but because they remembered too much to stand in the way. The war table was already active when Jurgensen stepped into the briefing room. 3 admirals stood around the projection core, outlines of the Kravthor territories rotating slowly in pale blue. Tactical grids pulsed in red. Ship routes, energy signatures, mobilization patterns. Everything was ready to move. "Captain Tobias Jurgensen," said Admiral Renwick, a stern man with silvered hair and skin creased by too many deployments. He didn't offer a handshake, just a nod. "High Command has selected you to lead the retaliation force." Jurgensen didn't respond right away. He approached the hologram and watched the systems shift. Skanda, Ganshek, Bariman, all known to him. All once empty space on old charts. "You know the enemy. You know the terrain," added Admiral Kurtz, leaner, younger, but with eyes that had seen just as much. "You survived what they call a victory." "They're not ready," said the third, Admiral Harlan Mikola, a man built like a wall of stone, voice calm as gravity. "But that doesn't mean they won't try to make it hurt. We need someone who won't blink." Jurgensen's jaw tightened. "You want me to command the operation?" "We need you to," Renwick said. "Not because you're a hero, because you're the one who understands what this is." "What is it exactly?" "A correction." Jurgensen looked again at the star map. He saw not just coordinates or enemy positions. He saw moments, places the Wardruna passed, systems the crew had studied, laughed near, broken bread under unfamiliar suns. His fingers flexed unconsciously. He saw Jen and Quan trading barbs over engine maintenance, Eames yelling across the mess for someone to shut off a music loop, Bryn asking about Earth cities she'd never see. He saw a family, and then he saw how quickly they'd been erased. He closed his eyes. "Just for a second. I'll lead." No ceremony followed. No applause. Just approval in the form of motion. Renwick flicked a data shard across the table. "Your operation. Draft the strategy with our command leads. We want 3 points of impact. Swift. Total. No occupation." "We're not here to conquer," Kurt said. "We're here to make sure they never make this mistake again." In the Ashura's command planning suite, Jurgensen stood with his sleeves rolled up, jaw tight, voice sharp. 3 screens hovered in front of him. Beside him, Captain Watson, now reassigned to serve as tactical advisor, leaned forward, arms crossed. "Phase 1, Strike Skanda, their largest orbital weapons platform. It's automated, but with command override protocols. We neutralize that and they're blind." Jurgensen's hand swiped to the second screen. "Phase 2, Ganshek, Logistics Center. Fuel, transport, relay nodes. We cut that artery. They can't move supplies or regroup. It's the spinal cord." He shifted to the third. "Phase 3, Barichman, capital. Not the city, not civilians, just the military command hub. We execute during their defensive shift cycle, force them into a standstill. The operation ends when that fleet collapses." Lieutenant Halley spoke up, reading through the coordination paths. "That requires precise timing between all strike teams, down to seconds." Jurgensen nodded. "We'll run joint sub-command protocols from Ashura. Everything leads from here." Watson raised an eyebrow. "And who's commanding the hammer?" "I am." No one argued. Because no one else would have dared to try. The chamber was quiet. Jurgensen stood alone in the officers' quarters. A sealed locker opened before him. Inside, folded with precision, was a uniform that hadn't seen light in years. The black and gray layers of the old fleet, heavy fabric with no polish, no digital thread, no ornamental shine. Just mass. Just history. He pulled it out, unfolded it slowly. As he slid one arm through the sleeve, a memory flickered uninvited. Jen laughing in the Wardruna's common room, coffee sloshing from her mug as Quan told some wildly impossible story. Bryn half asleep with a blanket over her legs, boots still on, nodding along. Eames pretending to complain while adjusting the environmental controls to make the room warmer for her. He adjusted the collar. Another memory. Training drills in the upper bay. Sweat, laughter. Jurgensen pretending to be annoyed when the crew kept beating their records. He closed the jacket, secured the seal. No insignia, no rank displayed. Just the black stripe across the shoulder. The mark of a commander of the old fleet. He looked at himself in the mirror. Not as a man preparing for battle, but as someone attending a wake. And it was. This uniform was a burial cloth. When he entered the Ashura's command bridge, the officers stood. Not by order, not out of discipline. They stood because they saw the uniform, and they knew what it meant. Jurgensen stepped onto the central platform, hands behind his back. The projection rose, 3 Axis targets, 3 fleets on standby. Transmission lines open, silent. He looked across the crew. "This isn't about vengeance," he said. "It's about duty." They waited. "We hit what matters." We leave what doesn't. We don't wave banners. We don't raise flags. We finish what they started, so no one ever starts it again. The bridge lights dimmed slightly, orders relayed across channels. Ashura was now the lead vessel of the operation, the voice of the mission. Jurgensen took his seat. The chair didn't hum or light up. No sound, no fanfare, just the weight of legacy settling into place. He leaned forward slightly, watching as the three vectors lit green. "Begin phase sync," he said. The war was ready to start, and it wouldn't take long. It never did when the message was clear. 12 human warships emerged from the blind edge of the Krav-Thor star, erupting into real space in a single, silent, synchronized leap. The gravitational shadow still rippled behind them as Ashura took point, followed by the heavy cruisers, Vigil, Ararat, Fortune's Wake, and 9 more, all forming a spearhead. To the flanks moved 4 smaller vessels with dense thermal shielding and reinforced ventral plating. At the center, towering like a floating fortress, the dreadnought Soul's burden drifted into place, weapons ports already glowing. They didn't break formation. They didn't decelerate. No challenge issued. No signal sent. In the planetary defense grid orbiting Skanda, Krav-Thor control nodes finally picked up the intrusion. It was already too late. Foreign vessels, 12, 16 contacts, bearing direct, cried Commander General, hunched over his console, 6 clawed fingers dancing over glyphs. He stood on the central command node of the orbital network known as Ring Fortress 1, a coiled spine of armor, bristling with autocannon towers and torpedo racks. "They've bypassed all outer beacons. How did they—" "Doesn't matter," growled Overseer Curran, plated in dull red exoarmor shaped like folded bone. His breath rasped from a voice box implant. "Arm every turret. Launch every—" The first wave struck. Kinetic missiles, launched from 12 warships in perfect oblique dispersion, screamed toward the orbital array at Mach 22. The warheads didn't carry explosives. They didn't need to. Mass alone was the weapon. The impacts landed in 3 precise clusters: central node, relay hub, and targeting spine. In less than 14 seconds, every major orbital weapon platform over Skanda ceased to exist, either shattered, drifting in burning chunks, or collapsing into the upper atmosphere like flaming wreckage. The Krav-Thor never got a shot off. "Target 1 neutralized," came the voice from Ararat's forward command. On board Ashura, Jurgensen stood with one hand on the central console, sweat beaded behind his neck. Not from panic, there was no time for that. Just heat, tension, control. "Shift to Vector 2, he ordered. The second squadron peeled away, engines flaring with anti-drift adjustment burns. Their trajectory curved sharp, slingshotting off Skanda's gravity well and hurtling toward Ganshek, a mid-sized moon housing the Krav-Thor's primary fuel and logistics nexus. The Krav-Thor had fortified the surface, but they hadn't expected an orbital attack from this vector. As Vigil and Fortune's Wake aligned for bombardment, Jurgensen activated the unified fire protocol. "Execute," he said. Railguns fired, 5 in sequence, from high polar orbit. Each round, a tungsten spike the size of a dropship, punched through the moon's atmosphere with surgical precision. Explosions lit up Ganshek's surface as fuel reservoirs detonated in blue-white gouts. Massive hangars folded inward. Comm towers fell like brittle bone. No civilian zones were hit. The damage was total, but contained. In 38 seconds, Ganshek's entire supply grid ceased to function. "Return fire, anywhere, now!" shouted Krav-Thor warlord Taharjal aboard the Kronax Vulture, an elite response ship scrambling from the outer field. The command chamber was red-lit, panicked. Officers moved erratically, shouting to each other over comms. But nothing responded in time. The humans had already jammed the fleet's forward telemetry using wave patterns scrambling the Krav-Thor had never encountered, based on old pre-expansion tech, previously thought inefficient. The Krav-Thor counter-barrage misfired into empty space. Then came the interceptors. 12 small, maneuverable human ships swept in from behind the orbital plane. Not sleek fighters, but hunter-class interceptors, built for ambush, control, and elimination. They weren't trying to win a dogfight. They were sealing exits. One Kravthor escape frigate attempted to burn for high orbit. It never made it. 3 interceptors caught it mid-ascent and riddled the drive coils with focused kinetic darts. The vessel spiraled, breaking apart before it could even angle toward a warp corridor. Others tried to scatter. The humans didn't pursue in chaos. They funneled. Classic pin tactics. Cornering with soft blockade signals, then disabling engines. No overkill, just finality. The message was clear. You're not leaving. Reduced. Fleet Captain Darren Coe, commander of the Vigil, spoke through secured channel. Targets neutralized. No retaliation with precision. They're firing blind. Losses? Jurgensen asked. None. Not on our side. Broadcast the message, Jurgensen said. Lieutenant Halley sent the signal. Broadband, all frequencies, translated into over 90 tongues. Proportional response to the destruction of the UES Wardruna has begun. This is a punitive operation. The Kravthor Imperium is hereby declared disarmed. On Barihman, panic bloomed. High Chancellor Rekthul paced in his tactical observatory, flanked by 3 military advisors. His crest horns glowed faintly with agitation, and his armored robes dragged over polished stone with every step. They destroyed Skanda, said General Vorn, voice low. Not crippled, destroyed. And Ganshek? Asked Rekthul, eyes narrowed. Supply lines are gone. Entire sector command relays are dark. Communications burned out. And we've lost 6 warships without engaging. How are they this precise? The Chancellor demanded. No one answered. Then one of the aides, a younger male shivering, hands folded tight, spoke up, almost whispering. It's not just weapons, he said. It's memory. They're remembering how to do this. Jurgensen stood on the bridge, watching the aftermath scroll across the displays. Every target hit, no stray rounds, civilian sectors untouched, power broken, resistance shattered. He gave no speech, no dramatic order. Phase 1 complete. Begin retraction countdown. They came in silence. They struck in silence. And now, just as silently, the first wave began to pull back, vanishing into the stars before the galaxy could catch its breath. Bariman's sky cracked open. From the edge of the atmosphere, streaks of heat and light tore downward, not meteors, but re-entry trails from orbital strikes shifting into final position. The Kravthor capital had minutes, maybe less, to prepare, and they already knew it wouldn't be enough. High above, the Ashura and its battle group broke formation into a spread pattern, angled wings of assault vessels splitting into synchronized flanks. Behind them came Saul's burden, dragging a halo of smaller warships like satellites pulled into its wake. Inside the Planetary Defense Command, alarms screamed across every surface. 3 squadrons ready, barked General Narlok Than, a broad, armor-shelled Kravthor tactician with 6 tusks and ceremonial etchings carved into his helmet. Mobilize orbital reserves. Shields to full. Get the fleet up now. Operators moved frantically across multi-tiered glyph stations. The capital's last remaining squadrons, a mix of interceptors, blockade drones, and 2 aged cruisers, began launch sequences. On the surface, power cores flared across underground vaults as Kravthor legions moved into anti-air configuration. They were trying to brace, but they were already mid-shift. That's when the humans hit. Execute guillotine, Jurgensen said. A single phrase. Cold. Measured. And Ashura's AI relayed it instantly. High above Bar Eamon, the human assault group re-angled. Not to descend. To curve. The fleet arced over the orbital lane and struck not at the ships, but at their sensors. 5 guided kinetic rounds, cloaked under magnetic scatter, pierced the Kravthor's tactical relay towers, shattering uplinks, scrambling battle networks. A burst of directed EMPs followed, washing over the command grid and fragmenting their own targeting data. The Kravthor orbital reserve, halfway through deployment, staggered. They didn't see the real hit coming. The second human strike dropped in low orbit. Rail-mounted gravity rounds slicing through hangar doors before engines could ignite. Interceptors still in prep exploded where they stood. Cruisers trying to rise had their stabilizers annihilated mid-burn. One collapsed onto a launch tower. The other spiraled into low-altitude drift before detonating in mid-air. The Krav-Thor defenders tried to counter, but couldn't lock targets. They were changing formation, and the humans had chosen that moment to strike. Down in the central command vault, General Narlok watched as entire squadrons blinked from his display. Not marked destroyed, just gone. The system didn't register the kills. It couldn't. No signals returned. A younger officer, barely past his trial markings, stared at the screen, trembling. "They're not breaking formation," he whispered. "They're not adapting, because they don't need to." Narlok teeth ground together. "Tell the Capital Command Corps to hold. We will not surrender." "There's nothing left to hold," the youth snapped. "They're not targeting civilians. They're not razing cities. They're removing us." From orbit, the battle ended in 27 minutes. No flourish, no comms chatter. The Krav-Thor fleet had been dismantled mid-breath. Their command sensors shattered, coordination severed. What few ships survived drifted without orders, spinning in low orbit, engines damaged, weapons inert. On the surface, the military command relay went dark. Then came silence. Inside the diplomatic chamber of Bar Emon's Hall of Accord, 7 Krav-Thor officials stood in a half-circle. Robes torn, armor scratched, horns unadorned. The youngest, Sub-Minister Drell Vax, looked barely old enough to carry his own blade. He glanced up at the silent figure before them. Captain Magnus Watson, now representing Earth's Forward Operations Council. He stood alone. No guards, no weapons. The chamber didn't need threats anymore. "I speak for the Imperium," rasped Prime Voice Kelthna, an elder whose bones cracked audibly with each breath. "We submit. Military capacity is void. We acknowledge your operation." He held out a sealed shard, the Krav-Thor's symbolic marker of surrender. It glowed dull blue, its core barely pulsing. Drellvax stepped forward with it and, hesitating, offered the shard with both hands. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We didn't know what you were, what you remembered." A slap cracked through the chamber. Kelthna had struck the boy across the jaw. "You do not apologize to predators," the old minister hissed. "You bow so they don't bite. You do not beg." Watson said nothing. He took the shard without expression and left the room. In orbit, the Ashura turned slowly, its belly still warm from controlled bombardment. Jurgensen stood near the wide projection viewport, arms folded. "The signal?" he asked. Hallie nodded. "Transmitted. Council has confirmed receipt of Krav-Thor declaration. No interference." Jurgensen's gaze lingered on the debris field outside. Wreckage drifted in silence. Parts of Krav-Thor hulls turned slowly in zero-G, some still trailing sparks, others simply inert, mute testimony to precision. "Are we staying?" "No," Hallie answered. "Orders are to regroup. No occupation. We came to break the sword, not hold it." He nodded once, then turned to the bridge. "Power down engagement systems. Begin fleet regrouping." The crew moved with quiet efficiency. No cheer, no pride, just closure. Below on Bar Emon, as silence settled over the city, families stepped from shelters. Skies were clear. Towers still stood. The military was gone. But the world remained. The humans hadn't stayed. They hadn't planted flags. They hadn't declared victory. They had only ensured there would never be a second offense. A new quiet filled the orbit now. Not peace, but memory. Metal drifted like leaves through the void. Jurgensen stood alone at the observation deck of the Ashura, the reinforced glass stretching in a gentle arc above him. Below, the curvature of Bariman was lit by a fractured halo of fire and silence. Charred fragments of Kravthor warships spun slowly, some still glowing red from their ruptured cores. Others were just shells, open, dark, dead. One plate passed close. A chunk of armor, no larger than a life pod, drifting with a faded emblem scorched across its surface. The jagged sigil of the Kravthor Naval Command. He watched it tumble, slow and defeated, until it slipped out of sight beyond the curve of the viewport. Behind him, the bridge was quiet. Operational silence. No orders shouted, no questions asked, just screens, still frames of aftermath. "Final casualty reports are in," said Lieutenant Halley softly as she approached, her voice low so as not to break the atmosphere. "No human losses. 0 civilian casualties confirmed planetside." Jurgensen didn't respond. He simply nodded once. Across the tactical display, the fleet was falling back into standard formation. Vessels peeled from their positions with mathematical precision, rotating toward high-orbit vectors. Dreadnoughts dimmed their external arrays. The strike ships powered down targeting systems and rotated for departure. 12 minutes until departure ignition. After that, they'd be gone. No monument, no presence, no sign they were ever here, except for what had been destroyed. Jurgensen stepped away from the viewport, walked slowly across the deck toward his command terminal. Each footstep echoed just enough to remind the crew of his presence. "Open final channel to Earth Command," he said. Halley moved to comply. "Line secure." He stood tall in front of the central interface. The lights dimmed slightly as the ship's internal systems shifted priority. The holoscreen flickered to life. The sigil of Earth's Defense Command, simple, unadorned, faded in. Jurgensen didn't hesitate. "This is Captain Tobias Jurgensen, lead on Operation Arcanus response. All primary objectives confirmed complete. Skanda neutralized. Ganshek logistical grid removed. Bariman military command silenced." He paused for just a breath. No collateral. No civilian target struck. No retaliation attempted. He looked straight ahead, his voice steady, his face unreadable. Objective fulfilled. Protocol Arcanus closed. The signal went dark. He turned from the console, facing once more the open stars. The orbit was darker now. Most debris had been catalogued or scattered. A few Kravthor vessels still floated in disarray, engines dead, hulls fractured. It looked like a field after harvest. "Enough silence," he muttered under his breath. "Now, they will hear and remember." Minutes later, the Ashura began to rotate. Across space, the entire fleet shifted as one. One by one, they fell back toward the outbound arc. They didn't linger. They didn't mark their path. Every movement was controlled, calculated. On the main display screen, ship after ship vanished into deep space folds. Their drives flared briefly, and then left only cold stars behind. Jurgensen didn't watch them go. Instead, he looked down again, out the viewport, toward the dark planet below. He saw no enemy, only silence, and silence was enough. Aboard the observation tower of the neutral relay station over Deathkar's Gate, dozens of species watched the feed in uneasy quiet. The transmission had spread far, as intended. Ambassadors, envoys, military attachés gathered not to debate, but to witness. On screen, the last human vessel slipped into the dark, vanishing without flourish. "Why didn't they stay?" asked one of the younger observers, a scaled reptilian of the Jurakai Compact. Councillor Thorin of the Valari Alliance, a pale-skinned humanoid with mirrored lenses for eyes, answered without looking away from the screen. "They never stay. They don't occupy. They don't colonize. That's not why they come." "Then what is the reason?" Councillor Thorin's face twitched, something between reverence and dread. "They come to remind." In the ruins of the Kravthor Central War Chamber, the last remaining officers gathered in silence. There were no more commands to give, no more vessels to launch. General Narlkthan stood with one claw resting on the edge of a shattered display console. The other arm hung limp, fractured from the blast tremor that had torn through their inner shield bunker. He stared at the sky through a narrow viewport. There was nothing left up there. "We were proud," he said. Prime Voice Kelthnag grunted beside him, his tusks dulled and blackened. "Pride doesn't shield you." "No," the younger general whispered. "It doesn't." They said nothing more. There was nothing left to say. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.